All right, let's get straight into this explainer. Today we're doing something highly practical. We are taking what is arguably the most overwhelming exam on your entire syllabus, the CAIE A-Level Economics Paper 4, and transforming it into a highly predictable, totally manageable playbook. Look, Paper 4 has a notorious reputation, right? It's widely considered the hardest paper in A-Level economics. But here's the secret. It absolutely doesn't have to be. Exams are designed by humans, and well, humans love patterns. And to prove it, we're not just guessing here. We've crunched the data from 25 distinct past papers, spanning from 2023 all the way through to the February and March 2026 series. So you literally don't have to spend hundreds of hours stressing and guessing what's going to pop up on exam day.
What's super interesting about all this data is that Cambridge isn't just randomly picking topics out of a hat. No way. They're repeating the exact same patterns, the exact same structural requirements, and the exact same core themes year after year. And honestly, once you see the matrix, you simply can't unsee it.
So here's our tactical briefing for today. We'll start by cracking the exam pattern. Then we'll hit Section A, the Sustainability Hub. After that, we'll cover the microeconomics power topics in Section B, the macroeconomics must-haves in Section C, and finally, we'll wrap up with the golden diagram rule and the ultimate evaluation hack.
All right, let's kick things off with Section A, the Sustainability Hub. So, Section A is your data response. And if you look at the recent years, the themes here have shifted quite a bit. It's essentially become Cambridge's hub for sustainability and development. The probability we're dealing with here is actually massive. Like 64% of recent Section A papers heavily feature living standards and inequality. So you're highly likely to face a table of data where you've got to link something like the Gini coefficient or the Human Development Index directly to poverty levels.
Now, because of this, a crucial point is knowing the precise distinction between equity and equality. Students constantly drop marks because they use these two words interchangeably, but they are entirely different economic concepts. You have to distinguish between equity, which is fairness in distribution, like a progressive tax system, and equality, which is absolute mathematical sameness. This exact distinction has shown up in an astonishing 45% of recent papers. Nailing this nuance is, quite frankly, free marks.
You're also going to want this definition locked down tight: economic sustainability. That means meeting current economic needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet theirs. Why is this so important? Well, historically, the May/June series pivots really hard toward environmental sustainability and industrial microeconomics. So based on all that historical data, here's exactly what you should prepare for. Our primary prediction: market failure and the energy transition. You should totally expect a text on something like oil versus electric vehicles, focusing heavily on negative externalities and requiring you to draw a marginal social cost versus marginal social benefit diagram. Now, if the exam pivots to our secondary prediction, resource wealth, expect a case study on a low-income country, think Ghana, Bangladesh, or Pakistan, where they'll ask you to evaluate the impact of primary exports on their living standards. Moving right along, let's jump into Section B and C, the power topics. When we dig into the essay sections and we analyzed 96 individual questions here, it turns out 4 specific topics completely dominate the paper. In Section B, your microeconomics section, market structures appear in a whopping 95% of papers. And market failure and intervention is right behind it at 90%. I mean, just think about what that means for your revision strategy. If you master monopoly versus perfect competition and you really understand allocative efficiency and negative externalities, you are statistically guaranteed to have a Section B question that you can absolutely crush. Meanwhile, Section C, the macroeconomics section, has an absolute banker topic. Standard of living and development shows up 98% of the time. It's almost always on the paper, and it's frequently paired with globalization, which sits at an 85% probability. So, if you know how to confidently compare gross national income to the multidimensional poverty index, you are in incredibly safe territory. Okay, let's shift gears to the golden rules, formatting for top grades. Now that we know exactly what to study, we really need to talk about exactly how to write your answers, because this is the most dangerous trap in Paper 4. Get this, 78% of essay questions explicitly state with the help of a diagram. If you ignore that, or if you just panic and write a wall of text, you are heavily penalized. Writing a perfectly argued, brilliantly written essay without a diagram permanently caps you at level 2. That's a maximum of 9 out of 20 marks, which is automatically an E grade. Yikes. So, to bulletproof your score against this trap, you've got to be able to draw these 4 specific diagrams completely cold. First, a negative externality showing marginal social cost diverging from marginal private cost.
Second, the monopoly profit maximization graph. Third, indifference curves showing income and substitution effects. And finally, the J-curve for exchange rates. You must be able to sketch these accurately with fully labeled axes in under 2 minutes each.
Here's another critical statistic about how these questions are formatted. 62% of Section C questions will specifically ask you to evaluate an economic impact on a low-income country. You can't just talk about the US or the UK here. You absolutely must walk into that exam hall with specific, real-world case studies prepared for demographics like Ghana, Bangladesh, or Pakistan to secure those vital application marks. Know their main exports, know their inflation struggles, or their demographic challenges. All right, finally, let's look at the ultimate evaluation hack for securing the final 40 to 50% of your marks. We're tackling the final boss of Paper 4, the evaluation requirement. Literally every single essay question uses command words like evaluate or assess. Now, most students lose marks here because they think evaluate just means summarize what I just wrote. It absolutely doesn't. To force yourself into that top marking band, always trigger your evaluation points using this exact magic phrase. In conclusion, the effectiveness depends on. This phrase acts like a massive neon sign to the examiner, basically signaling your high-level critical thinking. But hey, you don't just stop there. You need to name one of these specific economic conditions right after that phrase. For example, you could say, the effectiveness of this tariff depends on the price elasticity of demand for the import. Or maybe, the effectiveness of this policy depends on the time period, as short-term costs may lead to long-term gains. I promise you that single targeted tactical line is worth far more marks than 2 extra paragraphs of rambling summary.
So there you have it. The exam pattern is completely cracked. You know that Section A is the sustainability hub. You know market structures and standards of living are statistically guaranteed to appear. And now you've got the structural hacks for diagrams and evaluations. The probabilities are entirely in your favor, and the strategy is crystal clear. So as you walk into the hardest paper in A-level economics, the only question left is, are you going to rely on luck, or are you going to use the data to go get that A star?